At 3 a.m. the world sleeps, but heaven does not, and neither does hell. This hour, this precise hour, is when the soul is most sensitive, the air is still, and if you listen close enough, you'll realize something stirs. Not outside your window, but within your soul. The 3 a.m. moment is not about ghosts or superstitions. It's about awakening. It is when God speaks softly, urgently, as if he hopes you haven't drowned out his voice with daytime noise. The warning isn't thunder, it's a whisper, a question. Have you prepared your house? You see, this isn't about bricks or beams. The house is you. Your thoughts, your values, your disciplines, your addictions, your laziness, your hidden sins. Everything you allow in knowingly or unknowingly constructs the walls around your spirit. At 3 a.m., what's coming to visit is not just a force, it's a mirror, a reflection of what you've allowed to govern your life. We often imagine evil arrives with fireworks, red eyes, or monstrous screams, but no, it enters as subtle compromise, as the thing you said yes to that contradicted your values, as the habit you excused because everyone does it. It is not the devil crashing into your house that destroys you. It is the quiet removal of your spiritual covering, bit by bit, from your own hand. God warned you not because he wants to frighten you, but because he still believes in you. There was a time you were sensitive to conviction, a time when you'd feel wrong even thinking about compromise. Now, you scroll past it, laugh at it, accept it, but at 3 a.m., when it's quiet and your soul is naked before the divine, the lie doesn't entertain anymore, it terrifies. God doesn't speak warnings for his sake. He already sees the outcome. He speaks because he wants you to reroute, to reclaim the authority you've surrendered by neglect. This isn't a drill. It's not a simulation. It's not a maybe. The enemy is coming, not with fire and chains, but with confusion, comfort, and distraction. He comes to shift your attention, to dull your conviction, to make you question what you already knew was true. And you let him in when you stopped guarding your thoughts, when you said, it's just a song, just a post, just a vibe. But God is saying, just a crack is enough for corruption to enter. At 3 p.m. you compromise. At 3 a.m. you pay for it. You wonder why your peace has fled, why your relationships spiral, why you can't seem to find your footing, because something entered, and you never stopped it. You never questioned its presence. You just made space for it, and now it has rearranged your spiritual furniture. But not all is lost. If the warning has come, it means you still have time. It means heaven hasn't closed the file on your name. You are the chosen one, not because you are perfect, but because you're still reachable. God warns those he still intends to use. He whispers to those who have let noise rule their homes. He knocks at night not to scare you, but to save you. Tonight, don't just sleep through it. Ask yourself, what would come to my house at 3 a.m.? Is it light, or is it shadow? Is it peace, or is it torment? What lives here? Truth or denial? This isn't a drill. It's the moment between decay and decision, and God is not asking for perfection. He is calling for awareness, for a return to vigilance, for a soul that refuses to sleep when the spirit is under siege. It's always 3 a.m. when the silence becomes too loud, not outside but within. You toss, you turn, but it's not your body that's restless. It's your spirit. The sheets are still, but your soul is pacing the floor. The world says it's insomnia. The divine calls it visitation. The moment when heaven pulls your spirit from sleep and asks, are you listening now? God doesn't need your attention when you're comfortable. He waits for when the distractions die, when the phone is put down, when the house is dark, and the noise of the world has paused. At 3 a.m., your mind is tired, but your soul is alert. It's in this hour that he whispers, not because he couldn't shout, but because only the hungry will stay awake long enough to hear. The warning comes not through thunder or flashing skies, but through a stirring. A knowing, a pressure in the unseen. It isn't fear, but wait. Something is about to enter, Something is shifting, and God in his mercy would rather disturb your sleep than let you wake up to destruction. Many mistake this hour as random, but spiritually it is targeted. It's a checkpoint, a divine surveillance moment. It's when the veil between spirit and flesh thins, and what you've buried beneath distractions comes crawling to the surface. Old habits you thought you beat, forgotten decisions you made in pride, hidden sins you covered with performance, they revisit, not to torment but to confront. This is not physical warfare. It's not about who's knocking at the front door. It's about what's been knocking at the door of your soul for months. And maybe, just maybe, God chose 3 a.m. because it's the only hour when your ego is too tired to argue. He doesn't alert you to punish. He wakes you because something is close, a shift, a confrontation, a reckoning, and if you miss it, if you sleep through it, you'll wake up wondering why things feel different, why peace left, why the anxiety came, why nothing feels stable anymore, because what visits at 3 a.m. isn't just symbolic, it's prophetic. It's the consequence of choices made at 3 p.m., the conversations, the compromises, the doors opened in the name of freedom, but never closed in the name of discernment. You think it's just another sleepless night, but it's actually a wake-up call from the spiritual realm. The problem is, we have been trained to treat all things spiritual as optional. We assume warfare has to feel violent. But the most dangerous invasions are quiet. They arrive while you sleep. They come in through unguarded doors. The ones you stopped praying over, the ones you stopped believing needed protection. That's why this moment matters. Because 3 a.m. is not for everyone, it's for the chosen, the ones God won't leave in ignorance, the ones he interrupts so they don't wake up to ashes. If he didn't care, you'd sleep peacefully, but when he disrupts your rest, it's mercy, because something worse is trying to enter. But here's the danger: when the spirit calls and the flesh rolls over, when the tug comes and you bury it under excuses, that's how patterns begin. That's how sensitivity fades. When you ignore the knock enough times, heaven eventually stops knocking. And by the time the danger arrives, you've grown too numb to recognize it. You thought the battle would come in daylight when you were strong, but it comes in the night when your walls are down and your thoughts wander. The devil doesn't need daylight to operate. He thrives in darkness. That's why the wake-up isn't about changing your schedule. It's about changing your sensitivity, your perception, your posture. If you don't interpret the hour correctly, you'll respond with sleep instead of strategy. And what was meant to be a moment of revelation will become a missed opportunity. You'll walk into tomorrow unaware that last night God tried to warn you. He doesn't deal in fear. He deals in forewarning. The issue is never his silence. It's our saturation, too full of ourselves, too full of noise, too full of comfort to recognize when heaven whispers. This isn't a one-time interruption. It's a pattern. A language, a rhythm, and if you're being stirred at this hour, it means your house, your spiritual house is under review. The audit has begun. Heaven doesn't schedule alarms for no reason. What you do at 3 a.m. sets the tone for your 3 p.m. What you confront at night determines what confronts you in the day, and if you ignore the signal, you empower the invasion. This isn't superstition, it's structure, divine order. When God wakes you, respond. When he stirs you, get up, because what's coming to your house isn't just an attack, it's a test, and the outcome depends not on your strength, but on your awareness. The stirring at 3 a.m. wasn't the event. It was the signal, the beginning of heaven's early alarm system, designed not to terrify but to prepare. Most storms don't begin with thunder. They begin with stillness, with a pressure drop, with birds flying lower, with silence so unnatural that it demands attention. Spiritually, the same laws apply. Before something breaks loose in the natural, there is always a subtle shift in the unseen. And if you've been awakened in the night, then you've been selected for advance notice. Heaven doesn't scream when it can whisper. The Father doesn't always shake the ground when he can stir the soul. The tragedy is that many only believe God is speaking when life falls apart. But often, the most dangerous sign is when life is too quiet and conviction stops knocking. That silence, that invisible weight, that urge to stay awake even though your body is tired, that's not anxiety. It's a spiritual draft, and heaven is checking who's awake at the post. God doesn't operate in panic. He doesn't speak in chaos. He prepares in patterns. If you look back honestly, the warning signs were already there. The uneasiness you felt when certain people came too close. The sudden irritation with things you used to tolerate. The way your peace started to leak even though nothing around you changed. That wasn't mood, it was message, a divine forecast. And just like a skilled captain can feel a storm in the shift of the wind, the spiritually aware can sense what's coming by the silence before it breaks. But here's the danger. We've been conditioned to ignore the subtle, to explain away the warnings. We say, "I'm just tired," when it's really spiritual fatigue. We say, "I just need a break," when we're actually under internal attack. The devil doesn't need to send demons to your house if he can convince you to sleep through heaven's silence, because what you dismiss as nothing is often the first indicator that something is approaching. There is a kind of silence that isn't peaceful, it's heavy. That's the kind that speaks louder than noise. It's not the silence of rest, it's the silence of suspense, like a courtroom just before a verdict. Like a battlefield just before the first shot. Like the stillness in your heart when you know something's off, but you can't explain it. That is when heaven speaks clearest, not in volume, but in pressure. And you feel it in places no one else can see. You laugh, but your spirit is uneasy. You go through routines, but you know something is wrong. That dissonance is not depression, it's discernment. God is telling you, check your house again. Look at what you've allowed, examine the doors, reassess the people. The silence is a summons to audit, because heaven doesn't warn unless something is close. But instead of listening, we numb it, we binge media. We chase noise, we fill every quiet space with content, so we don't have to face conviction. But heaven won't shout over your distractions. If you ignore the silence, you'll be unprepared for the storm. If you treat the wait as coincidence, you'll mislabel divine caution as emotional instability. And the tragedy is, when the storm finally hits, you'll say, "Where was God?" Not realizing he was in the silence the whole time. He was in the moment you felt uncomfortable at that event. He was in the moment you hesitated before sending that message. He was in the inner voice telling you to check on that friend, to cancel that plan, to revisit your prayer life. But the world taught you to chase peace through control. Heaven teaches you that peace begins in alignment, even if it's uncomfortable. Silence is the classroom where alignment is taught. The storm isn't always a tragedy. Sometimes it's a test. God sends warnings to the ones he's training for authority. The 3 a.m. alert wasn't just about danger, it was about deployment. You are being positioned, not panicked, but positioning requires preparation. And preparation begins with discernment in the silence. If you're being warned, it means God still trusts you with secrets. He still believes you can respond. Heaven doesn't waste warnings on those who have hardened their hearts. If he's speaking through the silence, it means there is still time. But time doesn't stretch forever. The question is not, is God speaking? The question is, are you quiet enough to hear? The silence came first, then the stirring, but now we deal with the structure, because the warning wasn't just about a time, it was about a place. What's coming at 3 a.m. isn't just looking for people, it's looking for access points. And the greatest access point isn't your front door, it's the condition of your house, not the physical one made of concrete, but the spiritual house built with choices, thoughts, habits, and convictions. The house that wears your name, the house that looks like your life. Your house is not shelter, it's a battlefield, and most people lose the fight because they never realized they were in one. They decorate their homes with entertainment, hang curtains made of convenience, and lay foundations built on comfort. But when the storm hits, when the darkness shows up at 3 a.m. and demands access, walls made of distraction do not hold. You think of your house as a refuge, but the enemy thinks of it as a target. What you call home, he calls a gate. What you consider private, he sees as legal ground. The moment you stopped guarding it, you gave permission without knowing. This is why the warnings came in silence, because the war isn't being fought with swords. It's being fought in systems, in atmospheres, in the small things you allow to live inside your space without questioning their purpose. Look around. What lives in your house that was never sent by God? What attitudes sleep in your bed? What bitterness sits at your dinner table? What hidden practices play through your television while your children are watching? You didn't build a home, you built a portal, and if you don't take authority over what enters, you forfeit the right to complain when peace leaves. The battlefield isn't outside, it's in the room you refuse to clean. In the corner of your soul where you store old offenses, in the drawer where you hide those late night addictions, in the silence you ignore when conviction knocks but convenience answers. Every time you say, "It's not a big deal," you lay another brick in a wall the enemy can climb. You prayed for protection but ignored instruction. You asked God to cover you while leaving the door wide open to every influence. The song you wouldn't let your children sing in church is playing on repeat in your living room. The boundaries you expect others to respect are the same ones you silently compromise when no one is watching, and still you wonder why the atmosphere feels off, why the heaviness stays, why you feel spiritually foggy in your own space. It's because your house is under siege and you never recognize the war. God's warnings weren't random, they were targeted. When he stirred you at 3 a.m., it wasn't to scare you, it was to awaken the warrior inside of you, to make you see your house not as a decoration of success, but as a domain of dominion. You don't need to be wealthy to have a powerful house. You don't need to be famous to have a spiritually guarded home. What you need is discernment, reverence, and the courage to confront what doesn't belong. You say, "It's just my personality," but is it? Or did that anger come in through an open wound you never let God heal? You say, "It's just how I cope," but is it? Or is that coping mechanism a disguised agreement with a spirit of fear, rebellion, or escape? Your house reveals your inner world. The state of your space reflects the state of your soul. And when heaven visits, it doesn't just look at your words. It inspects your walls. The battlefield isn't only inside, it's all around. And spiritual warfare doesn't begin with casting things out. It begins with shutting things down, with cutting the root before it bears more fruit, with identifying what behaviors you've normalized that were never aligned with your original design. If the enemy sees your house as a battlefield, why are you still treating it like a playground? If darkness is strategizing to enter through what you stream, what you say, and what you store, why do you assume neutrality will save you? You weren't called to maintain a house. You were called to govern it. You were given the authority to say, "Not here, not in my house, not under my roof." God's silence before the storm wasn't permission, it was warning. The warning wasn't just about time, it was about territory. Your territory, your house, the place you stopped protecting because it looked peaceful on the outside, but now you know, it's not just a house, it's a war zone, and the war is already inside the walls. The house didn't fall at 3 a.m., it started bending at 3 p.m., because what shows up in the night is never random, it's a reflection, an echo of choices made in the daylight. You thought 3 a.m. was the attack, but it was the harvest. What entered your house in the dark didn't break in. It walked through the doors you left open hours before. You gave it access in the casual decisions, in the unchallenged thoughts, in the unchecked attitudes. And now what once felt like an option is sitting in authority. At 3 p.m. you were busy, scrolling, laughing, entertaining yourself with content that wasn't neutral but spiritual. You thought, it's just a video, just a song, just a joke. But spiritually it was permission. Because everything that enters your mind becomes a seed, and every seed eventually bears fruit. What enters at 3 p.m. might seem small, but by 3 a.m. it has grown roots. You were too tired to pray, but not too tired to post. Too distracted to sit in silence, but not too distracted to scroll for hours. And you forgot. Your spirit eats what your eyes consume. You thought you were just killing time, but time isn't killed. It's invested or it's stolen. The way you spend your afternoon determines what has the right to invade your night. The attack at 3 a.m. is a mirror, not of who you think you are, but of what you actually allowed. Every compromise that felt harmless. It left the window cracked. Every conversation you entertained that pulled you away from truth. It unlocked another door, and the danger isn't just that something came in. The danger is that you don't even remember how. You say you were caught off guard, but truthfully you were caught asleep. You thought spiritual battles happened in church services and prayer meetings, but most of them begin in the mundane, in the attitude you dismissed as personality. In the sarcasm you called humor, in the bitterness you kept because it made you feel strong. At 3 p.m. it felt normal, but at 3 a.m. it feels like torment. This is the deception. Sin doesn't always feel evil. Sometimes it feels like entertainment, sometimes it feels like justice, sometimes it feels like relief, but when the silence of night hits and you lay in a house that no longer feels like home, you begin to realize what you welcomed during the day now refuses to leave at night. You see, spirits don't respect intention, they only recognize access. You didn't mean to open the door. You didn't know that gossip, pride, lust, or fear were entering with those thoughts and habits. But heaven and hell both move on legal ground, and when you invite something with your attention, you give it a place at the table, even if it's unspoken. The problem is we treat our spiritual houses like hotels. Constant flow of guests, no vetting, no discernment. As long as they make us feel good, we let them stay, but eventually those guests rearrange the furniture. They change the atmosphere, and suddenly the place you once called peaceful becomes oppressive. The shift didn't start at 3 a.m. It was simply revealed there. You wonder why your dreams are strange, why your sleep is restless, why your thoughts are clouded, why you feel heavy even after rest. Look no further than what you tolerated at 3 p.m. That's when the real battle was lost, not with a demon showing up in your room, but with a decision that looked harmless because it wasn't immediate, and now the silence has turned into weight. The conviction you ignored has turned into consequence. But even now there is still authority, not to erase what you allowed, but to confront it, to evict what has lived rent, free in your house because of past access. You can't cast out what you continue to entertain. You can't pray away what you keep inviting through your lifestyle. What enters at 3 a.m. is only possible because of what was agreed to in the light, and the agreement is not always spoken, it's practiced. In what you don't say no to, in what you refuse to confront, in what you keep labeling as harmless just to avoid discomfort. The storm is never sudden, it's built over time, and the good news is, if you can trace the access, you can reclaim the authority. You can close the door, clean the house, break the pattern, but it starts with honesty, with asking, what did I allow when I thought no one was watching? Because heaven was, and so was hell. The 3 a.m. encounter was never random. The storm didn't choose you because of bad luck. It followed a trail made of thoughts you never interrupted and emotions you never submitted. The enemy doesn't need to break your door down when you left it open. And it wasn't your front door he entered through, it was your mind. That's the door you forgot to lock. You guarded your bank account, you locked your car, you put passwords on your phone, but your thoughts. Wide open, your emotional world unprotected. You let anything in as long as it sounded good, felt familiar, or helped you escape. You didn't think it mattered because it was just in your head. But what enters your mind eventually enters your life. What goes unchallenged in your thoughts becomes a belief, and what becomes belief shapes your identity. You were trained to monitor behavior, not thought patterns, but the real war never begins in action. It starts in imagination. The enemy doesn't tempt you with fire first. He tempts you with idea, and once that idea goes unchecked, it builds a home in your mind. From there, it rewrites your perception. Suddenly you call conviction judgment, truth opinion, and compromise freedom. And all of it happens internally before anyone else even notices. Your mind is a gate, and every day voices line up to get in. Some sound like your own, some echo the culture, some carry old wounds, but not every voice deserves entry. And not every thought is safe just because it's familiar. The most dangerous lies are the ones you've been repeating to yourself for years. I'm not enough. Nothing ever changes. I'll always be this way. You didn't realize those words were spiritual contracts. You signed them when you believed them. At 3 p.m. they felt like random thoughts, but at 3 a.m. they come back with weight. You lie there, unable to sleep, because you never silenced the voice that said, "You failed again." You never answered the whisper that questioned your worth. And so the house, the spiritual house, is restless, not because of new threats, but because of old agreements still standing. You thought the mind was a private space, but in the spiritual realm, it's a public gate. Whatever you let in, whether through what you watch, what you hear, or what you meditate on, creates access. That's why certain battles feel personal, because you gave them personal permission. You thought it was just a thought, but it became a pattern. You thought it was just one moment, but it created momentum in the wrong direction. Your spirit, too, is a doorway. It was designed to host presence, but when it's not filled with truth, something else will fill the space. Emptiness is never neutral. The spiritual realm doesn't respect empty places. It invades them. And if your spirit is left open, disconnected from discipline, void of prayer, and unguarded by truth, it becomes a resting place for things that do not belong. This is why God wakes you in the middle of the night, not because he needs your attention, but because you need to confront what's been occupying your inner world. You're not under attack because you're weak. You're under attack because you were passive. The mind wasn't guarded, the spirit wasn't anchored, and now you feel chaos where there should have been clarity. We keep praying for God to protect our homes, but ignore that the home he's most interested in is the one inside us. We anoint our doors but pollute our minds. We ask for peace but feast on confusion. We wonder why we can't hear his voice, but we filled our spirit with so many others that his whisper is drowned out. It's not just about avoiding bad thoughts. It's about locking the door, taking authority, saying, "This doesn't belong to me," and casting it down. You can't control every thought that knocks, but you decide what gets to stay. You decide what becomes a belief. You decide what has access to your peace. What happened at 3 a.m. was just the evidence of what you never confronted at 3 p.m. And what you never confronted at 3 p.m. was because you never locked the gate to your mind and spirit. Not out of rebellion, but out of habit, out of distraction, out of fatigue, but now you know better. The door doesn't lock itself, and the storm doesn't announce itself, but you've been warned. The 3 a.m. invasion began with a 3 p.m. decision. And the only way to stop it is to go back, search the house, and lock what should have never been left open. You didn't recognize it before, but now it's clear. The sleepless nights, the strange weight in your chest, the mood swings that made no sense, the sudden disconnect from peace. That wasn't coincidence, that was preparation. God wasn't ignoring you, he was training you. The silence wasn't absence, it was instruction. And now the moment you feared has arrived. What was once a drill has now become war. The enemy didn't knock this time, he walked in, because the rehearsal is over. The warnings are complete. The whisper turned into pressure. The quiet nights turned into confrontation, and now what you tolerated has started taking over. What you excused has grown teeth. What you ignored has started speaking louder than the truth you once stood on. This is no longer theory. It's not something to journal about or discuss later. The fight is now. You were shown the patterns, the afternoon compromises, the open doors in your mind and spirit. You were stirred awake, not just to feel spiritual, but to prepare. Because God never gives warning without intention, He allowed you to feel the discomfort so you'd build discipline. He let you feel the invasion in your sleep so you'd finally rise up in your authority. But now there's no time left to train. It's time to engage. The drill was the late night whisper, turn it off. The battle is the full blown addiction now trying to own your will. The drill was the moment you felt conviction about that relationship. The battle is the soul tie now choking your ability to walk away. The drill was that dream where the atmosphere felt off. The battle is waking up with real torment and confusion in your space. This is how the spiritual realm works. It never attacks without sending signals, but if the signals are ignored long enough, the warning becomes warfare. And the tragedy is, many don't even know they're under attack because they mistook the drill for a suggestion. They thought the stirring was optional. They thought the tension was emotional. But all of it was God saying, fix it now or face it later. You prayed for clarity, and God gave you silence, not to punish, but to force you to see. But when you chose distraction over discernment, when you postponed obedience, the consequences multiplied. And now the thoughts are louder, the atmosphere is heavier, the emotions are harder to shake. Because the battle doesn't wait for your convenience, you can no longer afford casual faith. The enemy is not playing games. What he couldn't get you to do in the light, he's now planting in the dark. The thoughts come faster, the temptations feel stronger, the confusion lingers longer, because the battleground is your house, your inner world, and every inch you give he multiplies. This is why the training mattered. Those urges to pray when you were tired, that was God stretching your endurance. Those moments when the content you once loved suddenly felt wrong, that was God reconditioning your appetite. Every time you were awakened at 3 a.m. with that unsettled feeling, it was a divine fire drill. A rehearsal for the day the invasion became undeniable. That day is here. You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. You are under spiritual siege, and what you do now determines the climate of your home, the direction of your mind, and the condition of your soul. You cannot hide in logic when the warfare is spiritual. You cannot numb this one away. You cannot talk it down. You must fight, but the fight isn't with fists. It's not even with noise. It's with alignment, with discipline, with violent decisions to close doors, shut off access, remove permissions you gave through your daily habits. The battle is not won by emotion. It is won by obedience, cold, daily obedience. The kind that feels small but moves heaven. This isn't about survival, it's about territory. If the enemy can convince you this is just a rough season, you'll miss the urgency. But if you realize this is war, you'll respond like a soldier. You'll stop asking God to calm the storm and start commanding the storm to recognize who you are. You'll stop begging for peace and start building it. Yesterday was the time for reflection. Today is the time for confrontation. What you allowed has grown, but you're not powerless. You've been warned, you've been stirred, and now you are being activated. The drill is over. This is the battle, and it's already happening inside your house.